Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty cool story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. So get cozy, enjoy it, and watch it till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that endless war, there are fates worse than death. Tonight, we descend into one of the most harrowing scenarios imaginable in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. What happens when an Ork horde captures a space marine? Picture this, if you will. A warrior who has been genetically enhanced beyond human limits, armored in ceramite plate that can withstand artillery fire, armed with weapons that can tear through tank armor, conditioned through hypnotic indoctrination and years of brutal training to know no fear, to feel no mercy, to serve only the Emperor of mankind. This is a space marine, one of the Adeptus Astartes, humanity's greatest defenders. They are the angels of death, the bulwark against the terrors of a hostile galaxy. Now imagine that warrior, that posthuman demigod of war, broken and beaten, dragged through mud and blood by creatures that should not exist. Creatures that defy every law of nature and logic, the Orks, the green-skin menace, the fungal nightmare that has plagued the galaxy since before humanity ever reached the stars. What we're about to explore isn't pleasant. It isn't heroic. There are no last stands crowned in glory here, no noble sacrifices that turn the tide of battle. This is about what happens when the Emperor's finest fall into the worst possible hands, when the weapons designed to know no defeat find themselves at the mercy of Xenos that don't understand the concept of mercy at all. So settle in, let the darkness around you deepen, and let me tell you a story about horror, about endurance, and about the terrible things that lurk in the spaces between the stars. The nature of the beast. Before we can understand what happens when a space marine falls into Ork captivity, we must first understand what Orks truly are, because they're not simply aliens. They're not just another hostile species fighting for territory or resources. The Orks are something far stranger, far more terrible, and infinitely more dangerous than that simple description would suggest. The Orks are a biological weapon without an off switch. They were created millions of years ago by an ancient race known only as the Old Ones, engineered to fight in a conflict called the War in Heaven against the Necrontyr and their star-eating gods. The Old Ones needed soldiers, warriors who could breed quickly, fight endlessly, and survive in any environment. What they created exceeded even their wildest expectations. Every Ork is part fungus, part animal. Their biology operates on principles that seem to mock conventional science. They reproduce through spores that are released from their bodies throughout their lives, but especially upon death. A single dying Ork on a previously clean world will eventually spawn an entire ecosystem of greenskin life. First come the tiny squigs, little more than mouths with legs. Then the snotlings, barely intelligent creatures that tend the growing fungal gardens. Next arrive the Gretchins, small, cowardly creatures that serve as slaves and assistants to their larger cousins. And finally, the Orks themselves emerge, fully grown and instinctively understanding how to fight, how to build crude but effective weapons, and how to wage war. This life cycle ensures that Orks are nearly impossible to eliminate completely. You can win a battle, even win a war, but unless you sterilize the entire planet down to bedrock, the Orks will return. They're patient in a way that transcends patience, because they don't need to be. Time means nothing to a species that reproduces through death. But their biology, strange as it is, isn't what makes them truly terrifying. What makes Orks so dangerous is that they believe reality is negotiable. The Orks possess a latent psychic field that grows stronger the more Orks gather together. This field, which they call the Green Tide or the Great Gathering, has a remarkable property. It makes things work that shouldn't. An Ork weapon might be little more than scrap metal bolted together with no coherent mechanical principles. But if an orc believes it will work, it does. Their vehicles should fall apart under their own weight, but they don't. Their ships should explode the moment they try to enter the warp, but they survive. This psychic phenomenon means that orcs can accomplish things that would be impossible for any other species. They can create weapons of devastating power from literal garbage. They can survive wounds that would kill any other creature 3 times over. And their society, chaotic and brutal as it appears from the outside, functions through a simple principle. Might makes right. Orc society is organized around strength and size. The biggest, strongest orc naturally becomes the leader, the war boss. Those who serve directly under him are the knobs, themselves larger and more powerful than the average greenskin. The common orcs, the boys, make up the bulk of any warband, each one a formidable warrior in its own right. Below them are the Gretchens, who serve as laborers and cannon fodder. And woven throughout this hierarchy are the odd boys, orcs, who possess genetic specializations that make them invaluable despite not being the largest or strongest. These odd boys include the mech boys, who instinctively understand machinery and can build anything from ramshackle trucks to enormous walking fortresses called gargants. There are the weird boys, psychers who channel the collective psychic energy of the green tide into devastating attacks, though the experience often leaves them mentally damaged. And then there are the pain boys, the mad docs, the surgeons and physicians of orc society. It's the pain boys we need to understand most of all, because they're the ones who will take the greatest interest in a captured space marine. Pain boys are orcs who possess an innate, genetically encoded understanding of biology and anatomy. They know how bodies work, how to take them apart, and how to put them back together, though not necessarily in the same configuration. They're the ones who attach crude bionics called bionics to injured orcs, replacing lost limbs with mechanical equivalents. They're the ones who perform the feared squig brain transplant, replacing an orc's original brain with the brain of a squig, which usually leaves the patient with the intelligence of a vegetable, but occasionally creates something surprisingly functional. More than anything, pain boys are curious, pathologically, dangerously curious. When they see a new type of creature, their first instinct is to capture it, cut it open, and see what makes it tick. They're equal parts surgeon, scientist, and sadist, though they don't see their work as cruel. To them, it's all just research. The screaming is just noise, the suffering is just data, the deaths are just unfortunate failures in the learning process, and nothing fascinates a pain boy quite like a space marine. Think about it from their perspective. Here is a creature that's part human, part machine, part something else entirely. A being that can take damage that would pulverize a normal human and keep fighting. A warrior who heals from wounds at an accelerated rate, whose blood clots almost instantly, whose bones are reinforced with ceramic compounds. A specimen that contains 19 or more specialized organs, each one performing functions that pain boys have never seen before. To a pain boy, a captured space marine isn't a prisoner. It's the ultimate experimental subject. It's a puzzle wrapped in power armor, a mystery that needs to be unraveled one layer at a time. And they have all the time in the world to figure it out, because orcs don't get bored with fighting. And they certainly don't get bored with cutting things open. But before we get to what the pain boys do, we need to understand how a space marine ends up in orc captivity in the first place. Because these aren't ordinary soldiers we're talking about. These are warriors who have been trained since childhood to fight and win against impossible odds. They're equipped with the best weapons and armor that the Imperium can provide. They're supported by sophisticated tactics and centuries of military doctrine. They're organized into brotherhoods that fight with perfect coordination, where every warrior would die for his brothers without hesitation. How do such warriors fall? How does the unthinkable happen? Let's find out. The fall. A space marine is not easy to kill, and he's even harder to capture alive. Everything about their creation, their training, their equipment, and their doctrine is designed to ensure they fight to the death. The Codex Astartes, the great tactical tome written by the Primarch Reboot Guilliman, has entire chapters devoted to last stands, glorious deaths, and ensuring that even in defeat, a Space Marine dies in a way that brings honor to his chapter. But sometimes, despite all the training, despite all the preparation, things go wrong. Battles don't go as planned, circumstances conspire, and warriors who should have died standing find themselves alive, captive, and facing a fate they were never prepared for. The most common scenario involves overwhelming numbers. Orcs don't fight with subtlety or surgical precision. They fight with what they call the green tide, a literal tsunami of green-skinned bodies that crashes against enemy positions in waves that seem endless. When a green tide strikes, the sky darkens with Orc aircraft. The ground shakes with the thunder of advancing mobs, and the air fills with the cacophony of millions of Orcs bellowing their savage battle cries. A Space Marine can kill dozens, even hundreds of Orcs. His bolter, a weapon that fires self-propelled explosive rounds, can cut through Orc flesh like a scythe through wheat. His chainsword can carve through Orc bone and muscle with contemptuous ease. But there's always another Orc, and another, and another. Eventually, even a Space Marine's ammunition runs dry. His weapon jams or breaks, or is knocked from his hands. And then the Orcs are on him, dragging him down through sheer weight of numbers. Sometimes it happens more suddenly. An explosion catches a Marine at just the wrong angle, sending him flying, stunning him long enough for the Orcs to swarm over him. Or a Nob, an Orc leader bigger and stronger than his fellows, gets lucky with a power claw, those massive mechanical pincers that can punch through ceramite armor as easily as paper. The blow doesn't kill, but it cripples. It maims. It leaves the Marine helpless on the ground while the battle rages around him. Other times, it's not the Orc's skill, but simple misfortune. A Space Marine becomes separated from his squad during the chaos of battle. Communications are disrupted by Orc jamming or the electromagnetic interference from their crude but effective technology. He finds himself alone, surrounded, with no hope of reinforcement. He fights. Of course, he sells his life dearly, but eventually the Orcs adapt to his tactics, begin to coordinate despite their usual lack of sophistication, and manage to bring him down alive. There are darker scenarios too. Betrayal, though rare, does happen. A rogue element within the Imperium, whether out of greed, corruption, or simple stupidity, might sell information about Space Marine movements to the Orcs, or a particularly cunning Orc war boss, rarer than you might think but not unheard of, might set a trap specifically designed to capture Space Marines rather than kill them. One particularly horrifying possibility involves poison or biological weapons. While Space Marines are extremely resistant to toxins thanks to their enhanced organs, particularly the preomnor and oolitic kidney, which filter and neutralize most poisons, there are substances in the galaxy that can affect even them. Some Orc painboys have experimented with toxins derived from various lethal fungi, and on rare occasions, they've created something that can slow a Space Marine down enough to be captured. And then there's the simplest, most tragic scenario of all. A young Marine, perhaps still in his scout armor, not yet having received all 19 organ implants, not yet granted his final black carapace and the full power armor that comes with it. These scouts, while still superhuman by normal standards, are the most vulnerable members of any chapter. They're the ones most likely to be captured, simply because they haven't yet developed all the advantages that make a full Space Marine so difficult to subdue. No matter how it happens, the moment of capture is always chaotic. The Orcs aren't careful. They don't have protocols for prisoner handling. They pile onto the fallen Marine like scavengers on a fresh kill, yanking at his armor, hitting him with crude weapons to keep him stunned and docile, dragging him by the limbs or by his helmet across the battlefield. For the Marine, it's a moment of profound disorientation. Everything in his training tells him to keep fighting, to never surrender, to die standing if he must die at all. But his body won't respond. Pain receptors that have been dampened by years of conditioning suddenly scream with signals his brain can't ignore. His power armor, that second skin that's supposed to make him invincible, has become a cage, its damaged systems locking his limbs in place, or worse, actively resisting his attempts to move. And the noise. The orcs are celebrating. They're whooping and hollering and shouting in their guttural language, a pigeon mix of sounds that somehow conveys meaning despite seeming like pure chaos. They're not just happy to have won a fight, they're ecstatic to have captured what they see as the ultimate trophy. A space marine, one of the Imperium's finest. A humigit in fancy armor who thought he was better than them but learned otherwise. The marine is stripped of his weapons first. The orcs recognize that a hamsa, bolter, or a chainsword is valuable, even if they don't fully understand how it works. Some warboss or nob will claim these trophies for themselves, and there might even be brief scuffles over who gets what. The armor comes next, though this is trickier. Space Marine power armor is bonded to its wearer through the black carapace, neural interface points that connect directly to the Marine's nervous system. The orcs don't understand this. They just know the armor is tough, valuable, and difficult to remove. So they get creative. They'll use tools and weapons to pry open the armor plates, not caring if they hurt the Marine in the process. They'll cut through the soft seals at the joints, the vulnerable points where the armor must flex to allow movement. They'll use hammers and wrenches and makeshift crowbars, treating the armored warrior like a particularly stubborn can they're trying to open. For the Marine, this is agony. The armor is connected to his body at dozens of points. Ripping it away without proper procedures tears skin, damages the interface ports, and causes pain that even Space Marine conditioning can't fully suppress. But the orcs don't care about pain. They barely feel it themselves, and they certainly don't consider it when dealing with others. Sometimes they don't bother removing the armor at all. They just beat the Marine into unconsciousness and drag him away as is, armor and all. This actually increases his chances of survival, ironically, because the armor provides some protection from the rough handling that follows. And what follows is a journey into a nightmare. The captured Marine is transported to wherever the orcs have established their base of operations. This might be a fortified settlement, a crude fortress made of scavenged materials and orc ingenuity. It might be a space hulk, one of those massive conglomerations of wrecked ships that drift through the void, now infested with orcs and their entire ecosystem. Or it might just be a temporary camp, a collection of tents and scrap metal structures thrown up wherever the orcs happen to be fighting. The journey itself is brutal. Orcs don't have prisoner transports. They'll throw the Marine in the back of a truck, a ramshackle vehicle held together with welding and hope, or chain him to the outside of a battle wagon, their equivalent of an armored personnel carrier. The ride is rough, violent, and designed more to show off the trophy than to ensure safe delivery. Other orcs will want to see the captured Space Marine. They'll crowd around, pointing and laughing, poking at the prisoner with sticks or knife points. Some will hit him just to see if he reacts, treating him like a particularly interesting animal at a zoo. The younger, smaller orcs will dare each other to get close, then scurry away giggling when the Marine moves or makes a sound. The Gretchens, those small servile creatures that do most of the menial work in orc society, will be tasked with guarding the prisoner. This is usually more insulting than dangerous. Gretchens are cowards by nature, terrified of almost everything, including each other. They'll point rusty pistols at the Marine from a safe distance, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. But there will be enough of them, and they'll be backed up by larger orcs, so escape at this point is nearly impossible. When the Marine finally arrives at wherever he's being taken, he's thrown into a holding area. This might be a cage made of scrap metal, bars welded together in a configuration that's barely structurally sound. It might be a pit dug into the ground, too deep to climb out of without tools or assistance. Or it might be something more elaborate, a cell in a larger structure, though elaborate by orc standards still means crude and uncomfortable. Here, in this holding area, the Marine has his first opportunity to take stock of his situation. He's alive, though possibly injured. His armor is damaged or removed entirely. His weapons are gone. He's surrounded by Xenos who view him as something between a trophy and a curiosity. And he has no immediate way to escape or even communicate with his chapter to let them know he's still alive. For most warriors, this would be the moment of despair, the moment when hope dies and resignation sets in. But Space Marines aren't most warriors. They've been conditioned since childhood to never give up, to never surrender, to find a way to serve the Emperor even in the darkest circumstances. Their training includes resistance to interrogation, techniques for maintaining mental clarity under torture, and strategies for surviving captivity or escaping from it. But that training was designed with other humans in mind, or perhaps chaos traitors, or the cold, calculating torture of the Eldar. It wasn't designed for Orks, because Orks don't interrogate prisoners in any systematic way. They don't care about information, except in the most superficial sense. They don't torture for military intelligence, or to break wills, or to convert enemies to their cause. They torture because they're curious, because they think it's funny, because they want to see what happens when you do this or that to a Humie in fancy armor. And soon, very soon, the Pain Boys will come to examine their new acquisition, and that's when the real horror begins. The Pain Boys cometh. In the hierarchy of Orc society, the Pain Boys occupy a strange position. They're not the strongest or the biggest, which is usually how Orcs determine status. They're not knobs or war bosses, the leadership caste that commands through physical dominance and sheer force of personality. But they're valuable, indispensable even, because they possess skills that other Orcs need. When an Orc loses a limb in battle, which happens with shocking regularity given their reckless approach to warfare, they need someone to attach a new one. When an Orc's skull gets cracked by enemy fire, they need someone who can staple it back, together. When an Orc wants to become even more killy by having weapons and armor grafted directly to his body, becoming one of the feared cyborgs, they need a Pain Boy to make it happen. This gives Pain Boys leverage. They can't command through strength, but they can trade their services for protection, resources, and most importantly, freedom to pursue their interests. And their interests, more often than not, involve experimenting on whatever creatures they can get their hands on. The Pain Boy who first examines the captured Space Marine will arrive with ceremony. Word has spread through the Orc camp that a Humie in fancy armor has been captured, and the Pain Boy has been waiting for this moment. He'll approach the holding area surrounded by his assistants, usually Gretchens who carry his tools, and possibly a few cyborg bodyguards if he's a particularly high-ranking Pain Boy, what the Orcs call a Pain Boss. The first examination is conducted with all the care and precision of a scrapyard mechanic looking at a broken vehicle. The Pain Boy will circle the cage or pit, studying the Marine from every angle, making notes in whatever crude system of record-keeping Orcs use, which might be marks scratched into metal plates, or simply memorizing through their genetically encoded knowledge. If the Marine still has his armor on, this will be the Pain Boy's first priority. Unlike the crude boys who captured him, the Pain Boy recognizes that the armor is sophisticated technology, far beyond even Mech Boy capabilities. He wants to see how it works, how it interfaces with the body beneath, what makes it so effective at keeping the wearer alive. The process of removing Space Marine power armor properly requires specialized tools, knowledge of the armor's systems, and access to the proper ports and connections. The Pain Boy has none of these things. What he has is enthusiasm, crude surgical implements, and a complete disregard for the patient's comfort or survival. He'll start by having his Gretchen assistants hold the Marine down. If the Marine is still capable of resistance, which is likely given their enhanced physiology, the Pain Boy might use one of his specialized concoctions. The Urti syringe, a massive needle filled with a mixture of stimulants, sedatives, fungal toxins, and whatever else the Pain Boy thought might be interesting to try gets jabbed into the Marine wherever the Pain Boy can reach exposed flesh. The effect is unpredictable. Sometimes the mixture actually works as intended, sedating the Marine enough to make him manageable. Other times it has the opposite effect, sending him into a fury of resistance that requires multiple Orks to restrain. And sometimes it does nothing at all. The Marine's enhanced organs filtering out the toxins almost as fast as they're introduced. Regardless, the Pain Boy proceeds with removing the armor. He'll use power tools, saws, and drills that scream and whine as they cut through ceramite. He'll use his stabby, bits, crude surgical implements that range from rusty scalpels to sharpened pieces of scrap metal to cut through the body glove that sits beneath the armor plates. He'll use his docks tools, a collection of wrenches, pliers, and other implements that might once have been surgical instruments, but now look like they belong in a torture chamber. The process takes hours. The Pain Boy isn't in a hurry. He's learning as he goes, making observations about how the armor is constructed, occasionally stopping to take notes or explain something to his assistants. If a piece of armor is particularly interesting, he might set it aside to study later, or immediately start examining it with total disregard for the fact that he's in the middle of another procedure. For the Marine, this is a special kind of hell. The pain is immense, constant, and varied. Each cut, each tear, each moment when a piece of armor is ripped away from its neural connection point sends signals screaming through his nervous system. His pain resistance, formidable as it is, wasn't designed for this. It was designed for battle wounds, for quick deaths or recoveries, not for prolonged, methodical infliction of agony. He can't even retreat into unconsciousness easily. The stimulants in the Pain Boy's mixture keep him hovering in a state of awful awareness. And even if he does manage to pass out, the Pain Boy will often have his assistants revive him. After all, the Pain Boy wants to see how the Marine reacts to various stimuli. An unconscious subject isn't useful for that purpose. When the armor finally comes off, the Pain Boy's interest intensifies. Now he can see the Space Marine's body in all its post-human glory. The physique is immediately impressive, even to Ork eyes accustomed to their own considerable strength. The muscle density is visually apparent, and the various scars and marks on the Marine's skin tell stories of battles survived. But what really catches the Pain Boy's attention are the subtle signs of something more. The black carapace, that layer of synthetic material beneath the skin that interfaces with power armor, is visible as a network of dark patterns across the Marine's torso and limbs. The Pain Boy doesn't understand what it is, but he can tell it's not natural. His fingers, surprisingly gentle for a creature known for crude methods, trace these patterns, testing their texture, trying to determine their function. Then there are the scars from the implantation of the gene seed organs. Most of these are internal, but some left external marks. The Pain Boy notices these too, recognizes them as signs of surgery, and immediately wants to know what's beneath the skin. So he starts cutting. The first incision is made with a crude scalpel across the chest, following the line of what might be the sternum. The Pain Boy doesn't use anesthetic. Orks don't feel much pain themselves, and they don't see why others should be treated differently. Besides, the Pain Boy wants to observe how the Marine reacts to different types of pain, how quickly he heals, what his thresholds are. The Space Marine's Larraman's organ, that small specialized organ implanted in his chest, immediately responds to the wound. It releases Larraman cells into the bloodstream, which are carried to the site of the injury. These cells form a synthetic skin substitute almost instantly, a thick black scab that seals the wound and prevents blood loss. The Pain Boy sees this happen and becomes fascinated. He makes the cut again, deeper this time, watching in amazement as the wound tries to seal itself even as he's still cutting. He summons other Pain Boys if any are nearby, because this is something they need to see. A creature that heals while you're actively damaging it. Remarkable. Fascinating. Definitely worth further study. The examination continues for days. The pain boy is thorough, methodical in his own chaotic way. He wants to understand how everything works. He cuts into muscle tissue and observes how the biscopea, that organ that enhances muscle growth, has affected the fiber density. He takes samples, probably intending to try to replicate the effect in orcs. He examines the bones, testing their strength, amazed to find they're harder than they should be, reinforced with ceramic materials by the osmodular organ. He discovers the secondary heart, that backup cardiovascular system that can take over if the primary heart is damaged. This excites him tremendously.
Hold on, can we just talk about how insane it is that Orcs technology works purely because they believe it? Like, imagine being a tech priest who spent 300 years mastering plasma reactor theory, and then you see an Orc tape a gun to another gun with actual tape, and it just works better than your carefully engineered weapon. I'd lose my mind. That's got to be the most frustrating thing about fighting Orcs from the mechanic's perspective. All their logic and science means nothing against weaponized belief. Anyways, back to the story.
Orcs are tough, but even they only have one heart. The idea of a backup is revolutionary. He spends hours studying it, trying to understand how it works, whether it could be duplicated. Eventually, inevitably, he discovers the progenoid glands. These are what he's really been searching for, though he might not have known it initially. The progenoid glands, one in the neck and one in the chest, are the key to space marine reproduction. They contain the gene seed, the genetic material necessary to create more space marines. In the strict hierarchies of space marine chapters, these glands are sacred. They're recovered from fallen brothers by apothecaries, using a specialized tool called a reductor, treated with reverence, and used to create the next generation of warriors. The pain boy doesn't understand their significance, not really, but he can tell they're important. They're different from the surrounding tissue, obviously specialized, clearly vital. He removes them, probably damaging them in the process because he doesn't know the proper extraction procedures. He sets them aside for later study, already imagining what he might do with them. The idea that excites pain boys most, the holy grail of their research, is the possibility of making orcs even better. Orcs are already formidable warriors, but they have limitations. They're tough, but space marines are tougher. They heal quickly, but not as quickly as space marines. They're strong, but pound for pound, a space marine is stronger. Painboy could understand how space marine biology works if he could isolate the secrets of the gene seed and find a way to integrate those traits into orcs. He would become the most famous, most respected painboy in the entire Green Tide. War bosses would compete for his services. He could command vast resources, conduct any experiment he wanted, pursue knowledge without limit. Some painboys have tried. The lore mentions ambitious pain bosses attempting to capture space marines, specifically to unlock the secrets of their gene seed. None have succeeded, because the technology and knowledge required are beyond even the impressive instinctive understanding that painboys possess. Gene seed isn't just tissue. It's the accumulated genetic work of the Emperor himself, crafted during the height of human genetic engineering, refined over 10,000 years of careful cultivation. You can't replicate that by cutting it open and seeing what's inside. But orcs don't know that, or rather, they don't care. Failure is just part of the process. Every failed experiment teaches them something, adds to their instinctive knowledge, perhaps contributes to the eventual success of another painboy centuries in the future. So they keep trying, keep cutting, keep testing, and the Space Marine suffers through it all. Days become weeks. The painboy returns regularly, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes disappearing for extended periods to work on other projects before returning with new ideas and new tools. Each visit brings fresh agony, new cuts, new tests, new violations of the Marine's body. The Marine's enhanced healing works against him in this scenario. His wounds close quickly, which means the painboy can inflict more damage without killing him. Where a normal human would die of shock or blood loss or infection after the first few procedures, the Space Marine endures. His secondary heart kicks in when the primary is damaged. His Laraman cells seal wounds that would be fatal to others. His oolitic kidney filters out toxins and manages his blood chemistry to prevent shock. He was designed to survive anything a battlefield could throw at him. He wasn't designed to survive a pain boy's curiosity. Eventually, the pain boy might move on to even more ambitious experiments. Cyborg conversion. This is where an orc who has been severely injured, or who simply wants to become more effective in combat, has massive portions of their body replaced with mechanical augmentations. Arms become power claws, legs become reinforced pistons, torsos are plated with armor. Sometimes so much of the original orc is replaced that they're more machine than flesh, becoming what the orcs call tin boy brutes, walking weapons platforms that lumber into battle, shrugging off fire that would destroy normal warriors. The process is imperfect even when applied to orcs, who have biology that seems to accept foreign materials with remarkable tolerance. When applied to a space marine, it's catastrophic. The marine's body fights the crude implants. His enhanced immune system, governed by the neuroglottis and other organs, recognizes the foreign materials as threats and attempts to reject them. His healing factors, meant to repair damage, instead create grotesque hybrid tissue as his body tries to integrate the mechanical components. If the marine survives the process, which is unlikely, the result is a horror. A mind trapped in a body that's partly posthuman warrior, partly orc machine, and wholly wrong. The neural connections are crude, causing constant pain as electrical signals travel through pathways never meant to carry them. The mechanical limbs respond slowly or not at all, requiring constant conscious effort to control. The life support systems that are grafted into the torso work well enough to keep the marine alive, but they can't replicate the elegant efficiency of his original biology. Some pain boys consider this a success. They've created a new type of cyborg, one that's tougher and smarter than normal. They'll show off their creation to other orcs, displaying it like a prize. They might even send it into battle, curious to see how it performs. But for the marine inside that twisted metal shell, death would be a mercy. And death, ironically, is the one thing his enhanced physiology makes very difficult to achieve. Breaking the unbreakable. While the physical torture conducted by the pain boys is horrific beyond measure, it's not the worst aspect of capture for a space marine. The worst part is the psychological dimension. The slow erosion of identity, purpose, and sanity that comes from being held by an enemy that doesn't even understand what it's destroying. Space Marines are conditioned from childhood to have minds as strong as their bodies. Their training includes extensive hypnotherapy, implanted post-hypnotic suggestions that reinforce loyalty and purpose. They undergo psychological conditioning designed to make them resistant to fear, to pain, to doubt. They're taught to draw strength from their faith in the Emperor, their loyalty to their chapter, and their bond with their battle brothers. But this conditioning was designed for specific scenarios. It was meant to help Marines resist interrogation by intelligent enemies seeking information. It was meant to help them maintain their sanity during prolonged combat against the horrors of the warp. It was meant to keep them focused and effective even when facing overwhelming odds. It was not designed for the specific psychological warfare that Orc captivity represents. The first challenge is isolation. Space Marines are never alone. From the moment they're recruited as aspirants, they're part of a brotherhood. They train together, they fight together, they eat and sleep in close proximity to their brothers. Even on the battlefield, they're in constant communication, their armor's Vox systems keeping them connected to their squad, their company, their chapter. The WH40K presence of their battle brothers is a constant reminder of who they are and what they fight for. Orc captivity removes all of that. The captured Marine is utterly alone, surrounded by Xenos who don't speak Gothic, who don't share any common reference point, who might as well be alien in every sense of the word. There's no one to talk to, no one who understands what he's experiencing, no one who can provide comfort or context or hope. The isolation is compounded by the complete absence of structure. Space Marines live according to schedules and protocols. They have duties, responsibilities, routines, wake cycles, training regimens, prayer sessions, maintenance periods for armor and weapons. Even in the midst of extended campaigns, there's a rhythm to their existence, patterns they can rely on. In the Ork camp, there's only chaos. The Orks have no consistent schedules. They eat when they're hungry, sleep when they're tired, fight when the mood strikes them. Days and nights blur together. There's no way to track time, no way to maintain the mental disciplines that require regular practice. The Marine finds himself unmoored from everything familiar, adrift in a green sea of alien noise and incomprehensible activity. Then there's the matter of purpose. Space Marines know why they exist. They serve the Emperor. They protect humanity. They wage eternal war against the enemies of the Imperium. This sense of purpose is fundamental to their identity, reinforced through countless hours of indoctrination and actual combat experience. They've seen the enemies they fight. They understand the stakes. They know that their sacrifice matters. But in captivity, that purpose becomes meaningless. They can't serve the Emperor from a cage. They can't protect humanity while being cut apart by Xenos. They can't wage war when they don't even have weapons. Their entire reason for existing has been stripped away, leaving only the suffering with no greater meaning attached to it. For some Marines, this loss of purpose is more devastating than any physical torture. They're warriors without a war to fight, defenders without anything to defend, weapons without a target. The cognitive dissonance is profound and destabilizing. The Orks, unknowingly, make this worse through their treatment of the Marine. They don't see him as a worthy opponent or a dangerous foe. They see him as a trophy, something to show off, a curiosity to poke and prod. They laugh at him. They mock him in their crude language. They treat him with the same casual disregard they'd show to a particularly interesting piece of scrap metal or an unusual squig. This is perhaps more insulting than hatred would be. If the Orks treated the Marine as a dangerous enemy who had to be carefully guarded and secured, there would at least be recognition of his capabilities, acknowledgement of what he represents. Instead, they treat him like a pet, or worse, like garbage that happens to be entertaining. Some Orks will throw food scraps at the captive, not out of any desire to feed him, but just to see what he does. Others will urinate on him, or throw dung or spit, treating him as a receptacle for waste. Young Orks will dare each other to get close and touch the Humi, then run away laughing. It's not systematic dehumanization. It's worse. It's the casual cruelty of beings who don't even recognize that they're being cruel. The Marines' chapter conditioning includes resistance to psychological warfare, but it assumes the enemy is trying to break him for a specific purpose. The Orks aren't trying to break him. They're just being Orks. There's no strategy to resist, no pattern to recognize and defend against. It's just endless, random degradation. And through it all, the Marine must maintain his sanity, must hold on to his identity, must remember who and what he is. Because if he loses that, if he breaks mentally before he dies physically, then the Orks have done something worse than just capturing him. They've destroyed everything that makes him a Space Marine. Some Marines try to maintain their mental disciplines through ritual. They pray, reciting litanies and catechisms from memory. The words don't have to be spoken aloud. The Marine can run through them mentally, using them as a focus point, a way to maintain structure in the chaos. The litany of hate, the catechism of the warrior, the oaths of moment, all the prayers and promises that were drilled into them during their training. Each repetition is an act of defiance, a statement that despite everything, they're still warriors of the Emperor. Others focus on memory. They review battles they've fought, victories they've achieved, brothers who have fallen honorably. They reconstruct their chapter's history in their minds, reciting the deeds of heroes and the lessons learned from defeats. They remember their Primarch, if their chapter has one, and try to live up to his example even in these impossible circumstances. Still, others turn their focus outward, observing their captors with the cold, analytical eye of a trained warrior. They study the Orks' behavior patterns, their social hierarchies, their weaknesses. They memorize the layout of the camp, note where weapons are kept, identify possible escape routes. They tell themselves that intelligence gathering is a valid form of service, that understanding the enemy will help their chapter in future battles, even if they themselves never escape to deliver that intelligence. These coping mechanisms work to a degree. They keep the Marine functional, keep his mind from simply shutting down or fragmenting under the stress. But they're not sufficient for indefinite captivity. The human mind, even one enhanced and conditioned as thoroughly as a Space Marine's, needs social contact, needs purpose, needs hope. And hope, in an Ork camp, is in very short supply. The Marine might find himself experiencing psychological phenomena that his training never prepared him for. Hallucinations, as his mind tries to fill the void left by constant sensory overload from pain and degradation. He might see his battle brothers, hear their voices, imagine that rescue is imminent, even though rationally he knows it's not. These hallucinations can be comforting or disturbing, depending on their content, but either way, they represent his mind's desperate attempt to cope with an intolerable situation. He might experience time distortion. Hours feel like days. Days feel like hours. Without external cues to anchor his perception, his internal clock becomes unreliable. He loses track of how long he's been captive. Was it days, weeks, months? The uncertainty itself becomes a form of torture. He might develop a hyper-awareness of his own physiology, monitoring his dual heartbeats, feeling his enhanced organs working, testing his healing factors by deliberately causing himself minor injuries just to watch them close. This can become obsessive, a feedback loop where he's so focused on his own body that he loses awareness of the external world. And in the worst cases, he might start to dissociate. His consciousness separates from his physical experience. He's aware of the pain, of the degradation, of everything happening to him, but it feels distant, as though it's happening to someone else. This is a defense mechanism, the mind protecting itself by creating psychological distance from trauma. But it's also dangerous, because it means the Marine is losing his grip on reality, on his sense of self. Chapter psycho-conditioning includes fail-safes against mental breakdown, post-hypnotic suggestions that activate during extreme stress. But these fail-safes were designed for different scenarios. They trigger phrases or memories that are supposed to reinforce identity and purpose, remind the Marine of his oaths and his duty. In normal circumstances, these would be enough. But there's nothing normal about Ork captivity. The fail-safes activate. The trigger. Phrases echo in the Marine's mind, but they ring hollow because the context they depend on no longer exists. I am a warrior of the Emperor means nothing when you're helpless in a cage. My duty is eternal feels like a curse rather than a blessing when that duty consists solely of enduring. In death, glory offers no comfort when death refuses to come. Some Marines, particularly those from chapters with strong spiritual traditions, might find solace in religious faith. They pray not just as a mental discipline, but as genuine communion with the divine. They believe, truly believe, that the Emperor watches over them, that their suffering serves some greater purpose they can't yet understand. This faith can be sustaining, can provide meaning even when all external meaning has been stripped away. But other Marines, particularly those from more pragmatic chapters, might find their faith tested beyond its limits. They've always believed in the Emperor, always served with devotion, but that devotion was reinforced by visible results. They fought and won battles. They saw the Emperor's works in the victories they achieved, the lives they saved, the enemies they destroyed. Captivity provides no such reinforcement. It's just suffering without victory, sacrifice without result. And in the darkest moments, a captured Marine might find himself wondering if there's any point to continued resistance. If death is inevitable, if rescue is impossible, if he's been abandoned by the chapter he served so faithfully, why keep fighting? Why not just give up, let go, accept the end, and be done with it? These thoughts are the most dangerous of all, because they represent the true breaking point. A Marine who gives up hope, who surrenders mentally, even if his body continues to function, has been truly defeated. The Orks might not even realize they've achieved this, might continue their experiments and torture, with no awareness that they've destroyed something far more important than just flesh and bone. But most Marines don't break. They endure. They hold on. They wait. Because that's what they were made to do. They are warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. And they do not surrender. Not to the enemy. Not to despair. Not even to the knowledge that they will almost certainly die in this alien hell. They endure because that's what Space Marines do. And they endure because, impossible as it seems, there might still be a chance. A chance to escape, a chance to be rescued, a chance to die fighting rather than in a cage. And that slim chance, that fragment of possibility, is enough to keep them alive. For now. The trophy and the show. Not all captured Space Marines end up in a Painboy's workshop. Some serve other purposes in Orc society. And while these alternatives might seem preferable at first glance, they come with their own particular horrors. The most straightforward use for a captured Marine is as a trophy. Orcs love trophies. Their culture is built around displays of conquest and demonstrations of personal glory. The biggest Orcs get to be war bosses not just because they're strong, but because they've proven that strength through combat, through victories, through accumulating the physical evidence of their superiority. Space Marine helmets are particularly prized as trophies. They're distinctive, recognizable, and they come in many different colors and patterns depending on the chapter. An Orc who can display a Space Marine helmet on his boss pole, that crude banner that many Orc leaders carry, is showing off in a way that other Orcs immediately understand. That's not just any Humie. That's a proper warrior, one of the fancy armored gits that actually put up a fight. But a helmet is just a piece of equipment. A living Space Marine is a far more impressive trophy. A war boss who has captured a Space Marine alive will want to show him off. This isn't just vanity, though Orcs certainly have plenty of that. It's also practical politics. In Orc society, leadership is constantly being challenged. Other Orcs are always looking for signs of weakness in their boss, opportunities to take his place. A war boss needs to constantly demonstrate his superiority, prove that he deserves to be in charge. What better proof than a captured Space Marine? The Marine might find himself displayed during gatherings of the warband. He'll be dragged out of his cell or cage, chains securing his limbs, surrounded by armed Orcs ready to shoot if he tries anything. The war boss will make a show of it, describing how the capture happened, embellishing the story with details that may or may not be accurate. Other Orcs will cheer and laugh, celebrating their boss's victory. Sometimes this display involves violence. The war boss might beat the Marine, demonstrating his superior strength. He might have other Orcs take turns, letting them prove their own toughness by showing they can hurt one of the Emperor's finest. The Marine, weakened from captivity and possibly restrained in ways that prevent effective resistance, has little choice but to endure. These displays serve multiple purposes for the Orcs. They're entertainment, first and foremost. Orcs enjoy violence and spectacle, and a captured Space Marine provides both. They're demonstrations of power, proving that the war boss is strong enough to capture and hold a warrior from a species known for being nearly impossible to defeat. And they're bonding experiences for the warband, shared events that create collective memory and reinforce group identity. For the Marine, these public displays are especially degrading. He's not just being hurt, he's being mocked, laughed at, turned into entertainment for creatures he was designed to destroy. Every blow, every insult, every moment of being paraded in front of cheering Orcs reinforces his complete powerlessness. Some war bosses take this further. They'll force the captured Marine to perform, to demonstrate his abilities for the amusement of the crowd. "Show us how you humies fight," they might shout, perhaps throwing the Marine a weapon to make it more interesting. If the Marine refuses, he's beaten until he complies. If he does fight, he's fighting for the amusement of his captors, which is its own special hell. These forced combat displays can take many forms. Sometimes it's just the Marine fighting multiple Orks at once, an unequal contest that's designed to be entertaining rather than fair. The Marine kills a few of them before being overwhelmed, which the Orks find hilarious. They think it's great fun, these humies who keep fighting even when they can't win. Other times, the Marine is forced to fight other prisoners, captured Imperial Guard soldiers maybe, or civilians from conquered worlds. This puts the Marine in an impossible position. If he refuses to fight, he's beaten or starved or subjected to other forms of punishment. If he does fight, he's killing other humans, potentially people he was supposed to protect. There's no good choice, only degrees of horror. The absolute worst scenario involves being forced to fight other captured Space Marines. This is rare, simply because it's unusual for multiple Marines to be captured in the same engagement. But when it does happen, the Orks absolutely love it. They'll pit brothers against each other, warriors from the same chapter forced to fight for the entertainment of Xenos. Most Marines will refuse. They'll stand side by side and fight their captors instead, accepting death together rather than raising weapons against their own. The Orks find this annoying, but also kind of amusing. They'll punish both Marines, then try again with different tactics. Maybe they torture one and tell the other that it will stop if he fights. Maybe they threaten to kill captured civilians if the Marines don't comply. Maybe they just keep trying different things until they find something that works. If they do manage to force two Marines into combat against each other, the psychological damage is immense. These are warriors who have been conditioned since childhood to fight alongside their brothers, to trust them implicitly, to die for them without question. Being forced to harm a brother, even under duress, even knowing the brother understands and forgives, is a violation of everything they are. And the Orks think it's funny. Some particularly sadistic war bosses will keep multiple captured Marines and periodically bring them together, not to fight, but just to see each other. This seems like a kindness at first. The Marines get to see that they're not alone, that other brothers have survived. They can communicate, share information, coordinate escape attempts. But it's actually a cruel psychological trick, though the war boss probably doesn't realize the effect it has. Seeing a brother in such degraded circumstances, knowing that he's suffering the same torments, is sometimes worse than suffering alone. The Marines bear witness to each other's degradation, and there's nothing they can do to help. They're forced to watch as brothers are taken away for torture or experimentation, knowing that they'll be next, or that they'll be left behind wondering what happened. When the Marines are separated again, returned to their individual cells or cages, they carry the knowledge of their brother's suffering with them. They know, viscerally and immediately, that they're not the only ones enduring this horror, and somehow that makes it worse, not better. Another use for captured Marines is as living decorations. Some Orks, particularly those with more complex social organizations, will keep prisoners as part of their camp's ambience. They're not actively torturing them every day, not forcing them to fight or work. They're just there, visible reminders of the Orks' conquests. The Marine might be chained to a post in the center of the camp, visible to everyone who passes by, or he might be locked in a cage suspended from a structure, hanging in the air where everyone can see him. The Orks go about their daily business, and occasionally someone will throw something at the Marine, or spit on him, or just laugh and point. But mostly he's just there, a piece of the environment. This sounds less immediately horrible than active torture, but it has its own psychological challenges. The Marine is on display constantly. There's no privacy, no moment of respite. He can't sleep without wondering what might happen while he's unconscious. He can't relieve himself without it being a public spectacle. Every basic biological function becomes a moment of degradation. He also has to watch the orcs living their lives, see them eating and laughing and fighting among themselves. He sees their culture, alien and incomprehensible as it is, functioning around him. He watches them maintain their weapons and vehicles, noting the techniques they use, the weak points in their technology. Part of him is still a warrior, still gathering intelligence, still preparing for the moment when he might be able to use this knowledge. But another part of him wonders what the point is. What good is intelligence if he'll never escape to use it? What does it matter if he understands orc technology when he's chained to a post with no hope of rescue? Time passes differently when you're on constant display. Without the structure of interrogation sessions or torture routines, without anything to mark the passage of days beyond the cycle of light and dark, the Marine's sense of time becomes even more distorted. Days might pass where nothing significant happens at all, just the endless existence in a cage while orc life continues around him. This kind of captivity can last a very long time. As long as the Marine is kept reasonably healthy, fed enough to survive even if not well fed, he can endure for months or even years. His enhanced physiology keeps him alive when a normal human would succumb to disease or malnutrition. His mental conditioning helps him maintain sanity through the endless monotony. But eventually, inevitably, something changes. The war boss who captured him might die, killed by a rival or falling in battle. The camp might be overrun by a different orc force, or by Imperial troops, or by another alien faction entirely. The war might move on, and the orcs decide they need to travel to where the fighting is, meaning they need to lighten their load. When that happens, the Marine's fate is decided anew. Maybe he's killed, his usefulness as a trophy having ended. Maybe he's traded to another orc force, becoming someone else's prisoner. Maybe he's finally sent to the Pain Boys, who have been pestering the war boss for access to this valuable specimen. Or maybe, just maybe, fate takes a more interesting turn. Maybe the Marine's chapter has been searching for him. Maybe an opportunity for rescue or escape presents itself. Maybe he gets a chance to die fighting rather than in a cage. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we discuss escape and rescue, we need to talk about one more aspect of orc captivity, perhaps the worst of all. We need to talk about what happens when orcs try to make their captives useful. Forced labor and the fighting pits. Orcs value strength above all else. It's the foundation of their entire society, the metric by which they measure worth. So while they might keep some prisoners as trophies, or hand them over to Pain Boys for experimentation, they also recognize that healthy, strong captives can be put to work. For a captured Space Marine, this leads to yet another dimension of horror. Orc labor camps aren't organized or efficient by human standards. There's no carefully planned work rotation, no consideration for worker health or safety, no long-term planning about how to maximize productivity. Orcs just grab prisoners and put them to work on whatever project needs doing, for as long as the prisoners can work, until they collapse or die. 4. Most prisoners, human soldiers or civilians captured during orc raids. This means back-breaking labor in terrible conditions, hauling scrap metal to mech boy workshops, digging trenches and fortifications, loading ammunition and supplies onto trucks and wagons. The work is hard, the treatment is brutal, and survival rates are low. For a Space Marine, the Orcs expect more. They've seen what Space Marines can do in battle. They know these armored humies are stronger than normal humans, tougher, more resistant to injury. So they put them to work on tasks that would be impossible or fatal for normal prisoners. The Marine might be forced to lift and carry loads that would crush a normal human. Not because the Orcs need those particular loads moved, necessarily, but because they want to test the limits of the Marine's strength. They'll pile on more and more weight, watching to see when he starts to struggle, laughing when he finally collapses under the burden. Or he might be used to break rocks, turning large boulders into smaller pieces suitable for construction or road building. The Orcs give him crude tools, maybe just a sledgehammer, and set him to work in the heat or cold or rain, with no consideration for the conditions. They don't care if he's injured, don't care if he's exhausted, don't care if the work is pointless or if they're just going to undo it tomorrow. The cruelty of forced labor isn't always in the difficulty of the tasks. Sometimes it's in their pointlessness. The Marine is ordered to move a pile of rocks from one location to another, which he does through hours of exhausting work. Then he's ordered to move them back, then move them again, over and over, accomplishing nothing, wasting strength on tasks that serve no purpose. This is psychological torture as much as physical. The Marine knows he's strong enough to do the work, knows he could be useful if his strength was being applied to something meaningful. But instead, he's being used as a beast of burden for the entertainment of creatures that don't even care about the results. Some orcs, particularly the mech boys, might actually put the Marine to useful work. They need help in their workshops, and a Space Marine's strength and intelligence make him a valuable assistant. The Marine might find himself holding pieces of metal in place while the mech boy welds, or turning cranks and operating machinery that requires significant strength to function. This is marginally better than pointless labor, because at least the Marine is accomplishing something. He's using his abilities, exercising his mind as well as his body, staying sharp. But it's also galling to be helping the enemy, contributing to their war effort, enabling them to build better weapons and vehicles that will be used against the Imperium. The Marine has to make constant ethical calculations. Is it better to help the mech boy, maintaining what strength and sanity he can, while possibly gathering intelligence about Ork technology? Or is it better to sabotage the work, slowing the enemy's preparations, even though it will result in punishment? Most Marines choose cooperation, at least initially. They rationalize that staying alive and functional increases their chances of eventual escape or rescue. They tell themselves that any intelligence they gather will be valuable to their chapter. They convince themselves that cooperation isn't collaboration, that they're just doing what they must to survive. But the line between survival and collaboration can get blurry. If the Marine's work helps the Orks build a weapon that kills Imperial soldiers, is he responsible for those deaths? If his strength enables the completion of a vehicle that participates in raids against human settlements, does he share the guilt for what happens there? These questions haunt Marines who are forced into labor. They're warriors who have always known their purpose, always had clear direction about who the enemy is and how to fight them. Being forced to serve that enemy, even indirectly, even under duress, goes against everything they are. But perhaps the worst use of captured Space Marines isn't in labor camps or workshops, it's in the fighting pits. Orks love combat. It's their purpose, their entertainment, their raison d'etre. They fight each other constantly, settling disputes and establishing hierarchies through violence. These fights are usually non-lethal, or at least not intentionally fatal. An Ork who loses a fight is expected to accept his defeat and submit to the winner's authority, at least until he gets strong enough to challenge again. But fighting other species, especially humies, is different. There's no point in keeping humies alive after they're defeated, so fights involving prisoners are fights to the death, gladiatorial combat for the entertainment of the mob. The Orks construct crude arenas for these fights, circles of scrap metal or ditches dug into the ground, spaces where combatants can be contained and spectators can watch safely. They drag prisoners into these arenas and force them to fight, either against Orks, who volunteer for the honor, or against other prisoners. For a Space Marine, this represents yet another impossible situation. He's a warrior, trained for combat, and fighting is what he was made to do. Being put in an arena where he can fight is almost a relief compared to being helpless in a cage or on a painboy's table. But he's fighting for the entertainment of the enemy. Every opponent he defeats, every display of skill and strength is being cheered by Orks who view him as a trained animal performing tricks. His prowess as a warrior, which should bring glory to his chapter and honor to the Emperor, is being turned into a spectacle for Xenos. The fights themselves are brutal. The Marine is usually given weapons, though not always the weapons he's trained with. Maybe a crude Ork chopper, that brutal cleaver-like blade. Maybe a slugger, an Ork pistol that fires heavy caliber rounds with little accuracy but plenty of power. Sometimes no weapons at all, just hand-to-hand combat. His opponents vary. Sometimes it's orcs, usually younger ones looking to prove themselves, or older ones looking for a good fight. These battles can be surprisingly honorable, in an orc way. The orc comes at the marine with straightforward aggression, trying to overpower him through strength and ferocity. If the marine wins, the orcs cheer because it was a good fight. If the orc wins, they cheer even louder because one of theirs proved superior to a fancy Humie. Other times, his opponents are other prisoners. Human soldiers, maybe PDF forces who surrendered when their position was overrun, or Imperial Guard troops, trained soldiers who know how to fight, but who can't match a Space Marine's capabilities. These fights are easier, physically, but harder psychologically. The Marine is killing humans, people he's supposed to protect, to save his own life and entertain the enemy. The worst fights pit Space Marine against Space Marine. As mentioned before, this is rare, but when it happens, it's devastating for everyone involved. The Orks create situations where refusing to fight means both Marines die horribly, where cooperation means prolonging both their suffering. They force impossible choices, and no matter what the Marines decide, the Orks win. Some Marines try to turn these fights into honorable duels. They'll agree to fight but structure it as a formal challenge, speaking the proper litanies and oaths, treating each other with the respect due to battle brothers, even as they're forced to fight. This gives the combat meaning beyond mere entertainment, transforms it into something that fits within their cultural context. But the Orks don't understand or care about any of that. To them, it's just two Humies hitting each other, which is funny no matter what words they're saying while they do it. Survival in the fighting pits requires a terrible calculus. The Marine has to win enough fights to stay alive, to remain valuable as a fighter, but he can't win too impressively because that draws attention from the pain boys, who might want to study what makes him so effective. He has to show enough skill to be entertaining, but not so much that he becomes a special project. He also has to conserve his strength. Fighting in the pits is exhausting, even for a Space Marine. He's not being fed well, probably has injuries that aren't healing properly, might be suffering from infections or accumulated damage from previous fights. Each battle takes more out of him than the last, and there's no end to it. Win a fight, and there's another one next week, or next day, or in a few hours. The Orks will keep using their valuable fighting Humie until he's used up, until he can't fight anymore, until he finally loses one battle too many. Some Marines embrace the fighting pits as preferable to other forms of captivity. At least here, they're doing what they were made to do. At least here, they can die in combat rather than in a cage or on a painboy's table. They fight with everything they have, turning each battle into a prayer. A demonstration that even in the worst circumstances, they remain warriors of the Emperor. Others see it as a final degradation, the complete perversion of their purpose. They were meant to fight for humanity's survival, not for alien entertainment. They were meant to die gloriously in defense of the Imperium, not ignominiously in a pit while greenskins place bets on the outcome. But either way, they fight. Because they're Space Marines, and that's what they do. They fight until they can't fight anymore, until death finally claims them, until the long nightmare of captivity comes to an end. And sometimes, just sometimes, they get a different ending, one involving bolter fire, drop pods, and brothers come to bring them home. Let's talk about rescue. Hope from the sky. In the grim darkness of the 40th Millennium, the most common fate for a captured Space Marine is death. Death in a painboy's workshop, death in the fighting pits, death from starvation or disease, or simply the accumulated damage of brutal captivity. The statistics are grim, the survival rate abysmal, but sometimes, against all odds, rescue comes. Space Marine chapters take the loss of battle brothers very seriously. Each Marine represents decades of training, countless resources spent on his creation and equipment, and most importantly, irreplaceable gene seed. When a Marine goes missing in action, his chapter doesn't simply write him off and move on. They investigate, they search, and if there's even the slightest chance of recovery, they mount rescue operations. The challenge is getting accurate intelligence about where the Marine is held and in what condition. Ork territories are chaotic, their camps constantly moving, their organizational structure fluid and unpredictable. Infiltrating an Ork warband to gather intelligence is nearly impossible for humans, and even Space Marine scouts find it challenging given the Orks' tendency to shoot first and never bother asking questions. Sometimes the intelligence comes from captured Orks, interrogated by chapter librarians, using their psychic abilities to extract information. The Orks' minds are strange, alien, difficult to read, but occasionally useful details can be extracted. The location of a major camp, the name of the war boss, whether any Hume prisoners are being kept. Other times, the intelligence comes from survivors. An Imperial Guard regiment that was overrun by Orks, but managed to evacuate some personnel. A civilian population that witnessed Space Marines being captured. Even just rumors passed along through the complex networks of Imperial intelligence, hints that something valuable might be in Ork hands. When a chapter has reason to believe one of their own is still alive and recoverable, they plan the rescue operation with the same meticulous care they'd give to any other mission. Reconnaissance teams scout the Ork position. Tactical plans are developed, accounting for the Orks' tendencies toward aggressive defense and their complete disregard for their own casualties. Assets are positioned, from orbit if possible, to support the operation. The rescue force is usually small, fast, and extremely capable. Drop pods screaming down from orbit, delivering Space Marines directly into the heart of the Ork camp. Thunderhawks providing air support, strafing runs clearing paths through the green tide. Terminators in heavy armor forming the vanguard, pushing through Ork resistance with inexorable strength. For the captured Marine, if he's still conscious and aware enough to understand what's happening, the sound of drop pods hitting the ground is the most beautiful thing he's ever heard. That distinctive thunder, that impact that shakes the earth, means his brothers have come for him. He's not forgotten. He's not alone. The Emperor has not abandoned him. But rescue operations in Ork territory are extraordinarily dangerous, even for Space Marines. The Orks don't have organized defensive perimeter, don't have sophisticated warning systems, don't have carefully coordinated response protocols. What they have is numbers, aggression, and an absolute love of fighting that means they'll swarm toward any combat with reckless enthusiasm. The rescue force has to move fast. Every second they're on the ground is another second for the Orks to mob them. They need to locate the prisoner, extract him, and get back to their extraction point before they're overwhelmed. And they need to do all of this while fighting through terrain they might not know, against enemies who might do unpredictable things like shooting randomly in all directions, or running away only to come back from a different angle. Finding the prisoner can be the hardest part. Ork camps don't have neat organizational systems. Prisoners might be held anywhere, in cages, in pits, chained to posts, locked in crude buildings. The rescue force spreads out, moving through the camp systematically, checking every possible holding area while fighting off constant attacks. If the prisoner is in a painboy's workshop, the situation becomes even more complicated. These workshops are often deeper in the camp, more protected, and the painboy himself might be present with his cyborg bodyguards. The rescuers have to fight through tougher opposition to reach their brother, and when they do, they might find him in a condition that makes extraction extremely difficult. Imagine being the Marines who find their brother. They breach the workshop, cut down the Gretchen assistants, kill the painboy if he's there, and then they see their battle brother on that crude operating table, cut open, pieces removed, crude bionics partially installed. He's barely recognizable. He's been violated in ways that no Marine should ever experience. But he's alive. And they swore an oath to bring him home. The rescued Marine is extracted with whatever haste the situation allows. If he can walk, he walks, supported by brothers on either side. If he can't, he's carried, slung over a shoulder, or dragged if necessary. The extraction team fights their way back to their designated pickup point, fending off Orks the entire way. The moment when the rescued Marine is loaded onto the Thunderhawk or Storm Raven when the aircraft lifts off and escapes the Ork camp's range, is a moment of profound relief for everyone involved. They got him. Against all odds, through all the dangers, they recovered their brother. The mission was a success. But success doesn't mean everything is fine. The rescued Marine is in bad shape. He has physical injuries that need immediate treatment. He might have infections, malnutrition, organ damage from the Pain Boy's experiments. His armor is gone or damaged beyond repair. His weapons are lost. He's been through trauma that even space, marine conditioning wasn't designed to handle. The chapter's apothecaries go to work immediately, stabilizing the Marine's condition, treating his injuries, trying to undo or at least mitigate the damage that's been done. This can take weeks or even months, depending on how long the Marine was in captivity and what was done to him. Physical recovery is only part of the challenge. The psychological wounds run deep. The Marine has been through something that no amount of training prepared him for. He's experienced helplessness, degradation, isolation. He's been forced to watch himself be violated piece by piece, with no ability to stop it. Chaplains work with rescued Marines, helping them process what happened, reintegrating them into the chapter's brotherhood, helping them find meaning and purpose again. This isn't therapy in the way civilians might understand it. It's reinforcement of identity, restoration of purpose, reconnection to the bonds of brotherhood that define what it means to be a space Marine. Some Marines recover remarkably well. They use their experience as motivation, becoming even more dedicated warriors, more fiercely loyal to their brothers. They channel their rage and pain into righteous fury, taking the fight back to the Orks with renewed determination. Every greenskin they kill is vengeance for what was done to them. Others never fully recover. They can still fight, still serve, but something fundamental has changed. They have nightmares about the Pain Boy's workshop. They flinch at sounds that remind them of Ork laughter. They struggle with feelings of worthlessness, convinced that they failed their chapter by being captured in the first place. These Marines might request assignment to the Death Watch, the specialized chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos that recruits from all Space Marine chapters. Serving in the Death Watch means leaving their home chapter temporarily, which can be easier for Marines struggling with the shame of capture. It also means specializing in hunting Xenos, which allows them to turn their trauma into expertise. Other Marines might seek out the most dangerous assignments, constantly volunteering for missions where death is likely. This isn't cowardice or suicidal ideation exactly. It's more a desire to prove themselves again, to demonstrate that despite what happened, they're still worthy warriors. They need to earn back their honor, and the only way they know to do that is through deeds of valor. Some chapters have rituals specifically designed to help rescued Marines reintegrate. Purification ceremonies, oaths of rededication, trials that allow the Marine to prove himself to his brothers and himself. These rituals serve both practical and symbolic purposes, marking the transition from victim back to warrior. But not all rescue attempts succeed. More often than not, by the time a chapter has gathered enough intelligence to mount a rescue operation, the prisoner is already dead. The Pain Boys. Experiments went too far. The fighting pit proved fatal. The captives simply couldn't endure long enough for rescue to arrive. When rescuers find their brother dead, they still recover the body, if at all possible. The gene seed must be retrieved, those precious progenoid glands that represent the chapter's future. The body is treated with respect, brought back to be honored with proper funeral rites, given the death ceremony that was denied during captivity. Sometimes rescuers arrive to find something worse than death. They find their brother transformed into a cyborg, so extensively modified that he's more machine than marine. The mind inside is still there, recognizing his brothers, trying to communicate, but trapped in a body that's been turned into an Ork's plaything. What do you do in that situation? The cyborg conversion can't be undone. The Ork bionics aren't compatible with human technology, can't be safely removed. The Marine inside is still loyal, still devoted to the Emperor, but he's been transformed into something that can never rejoin his chapter. The mercy is a bolt round to the head. Quick, clean, final. The rescuers hate doing it, hate killing their own brother, but they know it's the only kindness they can offer. They recover the gene seed, if it's still viable, and leave the rest. No body to bury, no honors to bestow, just the knowledge that they freed their brother from a fate worse than death. These are the hardest missions, the ones where you arrive too late, where you have to make impossible choices, where you go home having technically succeeded, but feeling like you failed. Some rescue attempts fail completely. The Orks are more numerous than anticipated, or they've been reinforced, or the intelligence was wrong about the camp's location. The rescue force has to abort, withdraw before they're overwhelmed, leave their brother behind. They'll try again if they can, but circumstances don't always allow for second attempts. These failures haunt chapters for decades. The knowledge that a brother is still out there, still suffering, still hoping for rescue that may never come. Officers review the mission, trying to determine what went wrong, how they could have done better. They vow to plan more carefully next time, gather better intelligence, commit more resources. But in the end, the cold calculus of war intervenes. Chapters can't commit infinite resources to rescuing individual Marines, no matter how much they want to. There are other battles to fight, other threats to face, limited assets that must be distributed across many needs. Sometimes, painful as it is, they have to accept that a brother is lost and move on. The Imperium is vast, the enemies numberless, and every commander must make choices about where to commit forces and when to cut losses. It's not callousness, it's necessity, but that doesn't make it any easier for the Marines who have to live with those decisions. The final fate. So what ultimately happens to a Space Marine captured by Orks? Let's look at the statistics. As grim as they are, the vast majority die in captivity within weeks or months of capture. The combination of injuries sustained during capture, the harsh conditions of Ork camps, the torture and experimentation, and the general neglect of prisoner welfare means survival rates are abysmal. Even a Space Marine's enhanced physiology has limits. Of those who survive longer-term captivity, most die either in the fighting pits or on the Pain Boy's operating table. These deaths might come as a relief, final release from suffering that has no other end. The Marine meets death as a warrior should, fighting to the last even if it's in service of entertainment, or he dies knowing that at least the horror is finally over. A small fraction are transformed into cyborgs. This is actually one of the worst fates because it means continued existence in a state of perpetual suffering. The cyborg conversion doesn't kill immediately, and the resulting creature can persist for years, trapped in a metal shell, unable to die, unable to rejoin his chapter. For these Marines, death really would be a mercy. An even smaller fraction are rescued. These are the lucky ones, relatively speaking, though luck is a strange word to use for warriors who've been through such horror. They get to rejoin their chapter, continue their service, find purpose and meaning again. But they carry scars, both physical and psychological, that never fully heal. And there are the unknowns, Marines who vanish into Ork territory and are never heard from again. No body recovered, no intelligence about their fate, just gone. Their chapters might search for decades, always hoping that someday, somehow, they'll find evidence of what happened. But more often than not, those Marines are simply lost. Their ultimate fate known only to the Orks who held them, and perhaps not even to them. The Imperium's official stance on captured Space Marines is clear. Every effort should be made to recover them if possible, but if recovery is impossible, they should be given the Emperor's mercy. A captured Marine who cannot be rescued should be killed, preferably from a distance with precision fire, to prevent the enemy from gaining any intelligence or resources from his continued existence. This is cold comfort for the Marines themselves, knowing that their own brothers might be ordered to kill them rather than let them remain in enemy hands. But it's also a kind of promise. You will not be abandoned to suffer indefinitely. If we can't save you, we'll at least end your pain. Some chapters take this further. They have standing orders that any Marine captured by certain enemies, including Orks, should activate their armor's self-destruct if they're unable to escape. The resulting explosion kills the Marine instantly and denies the enemy his body, his armor, his gene seed, everything. Other chapters consider such orders dishonorable. A Space Marine should fight to the last breath, should die only when he physically can't continue. Deliberately killing yourself, even to deny the enemy resources, seems cowardly to warriors who view death in battle as the highest honor. There's no universal answer. Different chapters have different philosophies, different traditions, different approaches to this terrible question. But they all agree on one thing. A Space Marine captured by Orks has suffered a fate that should be prevented at all costs. This influences Space Marine tactics in engagement with Orks. Marines are taught to be even more careful about maintaining squad cohesion when fighting greenskins. They're trained to recognize when a position is being overrun and to withdraw or fight to the death rather than risk capture. They're instructed to use their last bolt round on themselves if capture seems imminent and escape is impossible. Chapters that have lost brothers to Ork capture become particularly aggressive in their future engagements with greenskins. They hunt Ork warbands with special intensity, show no mercy even by the usually merciless standards of Space Marine warfare. Pain Boys in particular are targeted for immediate elimination, as are any Orks who seem to be involved in handling prisoners. Some chapters maintain kill teams specifically assigned to eliminate captured brothers. These teams are positioned during major engagements, ready to move in if a Marine is captured. Their job is grim but necessary. Get to their brother before the Orks can extract him from the battlefield, and kill him quickly if rescue is impossible. It's a role that requires both skill and a particular kind of moral strength, the ability to kill a brother out of compassion rather than hatred. The psychological impact on these kill teams is significant. They're doing the right thing, the necessary thing, but it doesn't feel like it. They're shooting brothers in the head, warriors they've trained with and fought beside. Even knowing it's mercy, even understanding the alternative would be worse, it takes a toll. The ultimate fate of most captured Space Marines, then, is death. Death in the fighting pits, death on the Pain Boys' table, death by the hand of their own brothers to prevent worse alternatives. But while they live, while they endure, they remain what they've always been: warriors of the Emperor, servants of humanity, defenders of the Imperium. They might be captured, they might be tortured, they might be degraded and violated and treated as curiosities by Xenos who don't understand what they've caught. But they remain Space Marines. They endure because that's what they were made to do. They resist because resistance is woven into their very being. They hold on to their identity, their purpose, their faith, even when everything external has been stripped away. And in their suffering, in their resistance, in their refusal to break completely no matter what is done to them, they demonstrate why the Space Marines are humanity's greatest defenders. Not because they're the strongest or the best equipped or the most numerous, but because they simply will not quit, will not surrender, will not abandon their duty no matter the cost. Lessons from darkness. What can we take away from this grim examination of Ork captivity? What does this tell us about the Warhammer 40,000 universe and the warriors who defend humanity within it? First, it reminds us that in the grim darkness of the far future, there are indeed fates worse than death. The Space Marines are designed to know no fear, to face any enemy without hesitation, to die gloriously in service to the Emperor. But capture by Orks subjects them to experiences they weren't designed for, situations where their training and conditioning prove insufficient. This isn't a weakness in the Space Marines. It's a testament to how truly alien and terrible the Orks are. They're not just another enemy to be defeated. They're a force of nature, a biological weapon that defies conventional understanding. a species that operates on principles that make no sense to human minds. Second, it highlights the importance of the bond between Space Marines. When we talk about battle brothers, we're not using that term lightly. Space Marines are brothers in the most fundamental sense, tied together by shared experience, shared purpose, and shared genetic heritage through their chapter's gene seed. The knowledge that brothers will search for them, will attempt rescue even at great risk, gives captured Marines something to hold on to in their darkest moments. Third, it demonstrates the cruel reality of the Imperium's wars. The calculus of military necessity sometimes requires abandoning individuals for the greater good. Chapters can't always mount rescue operations. Commanders sometimes have to order mercy killings rather than risk recovery operations. These are terrible decisions, but they're made in service of humanity's survival. Fourth, it shows us something about the nature of suffering and endurance. Space Marines aren't emotionless automatons. They feel pain, fear, despair, just like any other sentient being. What makes them different is their ability to endure despite these feelings, to continue functioning even when any normal human would have broken completely. And finally, it reminds us why the Space Marines matter. In a universe of horrors, in a galaxy where entire worlds can be consumed by alien hunger or twisted by chaos, where wars are fought on scales that dwarf anything our current understanding can grasp, humanity needs defenders who simply will not stop, who will fight against impossible odds, who will endure the unendurable. The Space Marines are those defenders, and even in captivity, even suffering in ways that should break any warrior, they remain true to their purpose. They are the Emperor's finest, the angels of death, the last line of defense against a galaxy that wants to consume humanity. When a Space Marine is captured by Orks, he faces torture, degradation, and almost certain death, but he faces it as a Space Marine. And that, in the grim darkness of the far future, makes all the difference. In closing, we've journeyed through one of the darkest scenarios in the Warhammer 40,000 universe tonight. From the moment of capture, through the various horrors of Ork captivity, from the Pain Boy's workshop to the fighting pits, from failed rescue attempts to mercy killings, we've examined what happens when the Emperor's finest fall into the worst possible hands. It's not a pleasant story. There are no heroes here, no triumphant victories, no moments of pure hope, just suffering, endurance, and the knowledge that sometimes the best you can hope for is a quick death rather than a prolonged one. But that's Warhammer 40,000. It's called grimdark for a reason. The universe is hostile, the enemies are terrible, and even the greatest warriors can fall. What matters isn't whether you fall, it's how you face that fall. Whether you maintain your identity and purpose, even when everything else is stripped away. The Space Marines we've discussed tonight, the ones who suffer through Ork captivity, demonstrate the ultimate form of courage. Not the courage to charge into battle against overwhelming odds, not the courage to face death without flinching, but the courage to continue existing, to remain yourself, to refuse to break completely, even when breaking would be so much easier. They are heroes, not because they escape or survive or triumph. They're heroes because they endure. Because even in the darkest pit, even on the Pain Boy's table, even chained in a cage as a trophy for Xenos amusement, they remain Space Marines, loyal to the Emperor, devoted to their chapter, unbroken in spirit even when their bodies have been destroyed. That's the message at the heart of this horror story. That's what makes it worth telling. Not the details of torture or the specifics of Ork cruelty, but the demonstration of what the human spirit, even enhanced and conditioned as the Space Marines are, can endure when it has purpose and faith to sustain it. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But there is also duty, there is also brotherhood, there is also the refusal to surrender even when surrender is the only logical choice. And that, more than any weapon or armor or tactical doctrine, is what makes the Space Marines humanity's greatest defenders. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the darkness. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Warhammer 40,000 lore, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories from the 40k universe waiting to be told, more horrors to examine, more heroes to honor. Until next time, may the Emperor protect you, and may you never fall into the hands of the green tide. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there are fates worse than death, and we've just explored one of the worst.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.